writing a LinkedIn profile that when someone reads it, they feel like they've heard your voice. I think is really helpful. You can use recommendations on LinkedIn that will share with others a lot. A lot of times recommendations speak to someone's performance, but they also speak to someone's character. So I feel
1, 2, 3, 4.
Today, I have one of my favorite people on the planet with me. It's none other than the wonderful Virginia Franco. So Virginia, thank you so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. You're one of my favorite people too.
Oh, all right. Okay. So I'll give you that $15 I owe you after the show. Great.
There you go.
So Virginia, let me tell you a little bit about her today. She founded Virginia Franco Resumes years ago when she recognized that her years of corporate communications, journalism, and social work offered her a unique understanding of how people read and communicate and share information. She helps clients all over the world, especially if you're trying to test the job search waters or get your resume in order, because she's a professional storyteller. And she shared her insights as the host of her own podcast, Resume Storyteller Podcast. And she's a proud supporter, board member, and former president of the amazing National Resume Writer Association. So you're kind of a big deal, friend. And personally, having grown up with a family business of our own and then creating Traction Resume myself, I always joke with you, like, business was mean back in the early 2000s. It was not the place I expected when I opened my own business, because I found this incredible community, and you especially, who really helped me get on my feet. So for so many reasons, I'm thrilled we're talking today.
My pleasure. I'm excited.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what everyone is thinking about today, and this day and age, which is layoffs. Because there have been massive waves of layoffs, especially in the tech sector. And for many of you listening here today, if you're in medical sales or in healthcare of some kind, you're seeing that while healthcare is traditionally somewhat insulated to layoffs, they are really cracking down in January. And as of this recording, many of the major med tech companies have experienced layoffs, as well as other companies too. So first, Virginia, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into starting your own business after a significant layoff in your life, in your family's life?
Yeah, no, these headlines that we're seeing around all the technology and technology adjacent companies are sort of, triggering, because it brings me back to what prompted me to start my business, which was the recession back in 2008, which hit financial services brutally. And I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, which is home to not one, but two banks. And so it was like, people were death walking. It was awful. My husband was in banking, and so he's in financial services technology, and so it was a rough place. And it reminds me a lot of what people are going through now. Lots of headlines. I didn't know about LinkedIn back then. Just a lot of what I take comfort in is knowing that a lot of the tools that are available now, if they were available back then, I didn't know about them. And I feel like there's a lot of support there for job seekers. But that crossroad prompted me to start my own business. I had lots of little kids at the time, and the idea of childcare would have made me broke. And so I needed to figure out what the heck I could do to bring in additional income. And I'd always written resumes for free. And so I started my own business. Unlike you, I did not have business entrepreneurship in my blood. I was a complete accidental entrepreneur, and Crossroads is the parent of invention, or whatever that phrase is, but that was me.
Yeah. And do you feel like first, so with your husband's layoff, did he know it was coming, or was it a surprise?
Complete surprise.
Okay.
Didn't see it. And we weren't educated in the signs. Like, if we look back now I could recognize him, but back then, no idea. And he'd been with the same company for, over 10 years. And so
Oh,
it was
wow.
not a company that had done a lot of layoffs. And so we didn't see it coming.
Right.
They were generous in their package, which was nice. Like some
That's
of the
good.
companies are now not, it's been hit or miss in terms of what you're seeing, but they treated us well, which I'm forever grateful for.
That's great. Yeah, that's not always the case. I'm really glad to hear it. So if you were to look back, what would you say that, the signs were that you'd recognize now that were happening then?
We weren't paying attention to the like the quarterly revenue earnings and things like that. We weren't aware of like you could tell when a company starts to invest in one area versus another, where your role fits into that, how close you are to the money that impacts your role. And we didn't know that when a call shows up on your calendar unexpectedly, that is very likely a chance that you're getting the act. So so it was a blind side. We did not know right away. There was as I recall, there was a lag time between when he got the news and when we found out what the severance package was going to be. So there were several weeks where we were in utter panic, and I did a lot of things right and a handful of things wrong. So
Sure. So I love that you just did a post on that, because
yeah,
I think that, when we're on LinkedIn and we're surrounded by these career coaches, myself included, and you too, where, we talk a lot about the things that you can do. Like you could post that you're looking for work, you can network your heart out, like you can get your resume together, but there's so much more that goes into that moment. And it's almost hard to take action because you're in that place of distress. So can you talk about the couple things that you feel like you did right, and then a couple things that you feel like maybe looking back, I would have done it differently?
So in terms of the doing right category, what we did was identify what a couple of the deal breakers were, and some of those had to do with salary, some of those had to do with traveling, not traveling. There was no remote work back then, or if there was, we didn't know about it. So there were a couple of those deal breakers. And then we recognized that probably the shortest path to landing, or the quickest path to landing, was going to be staying in something that was very similar versus doing a really big career change. And I think that holds true today. And then we literally sat down with old-fashioned pen and paper and made a list of everyone we could think of that we knew, and a list of companies that we thought would make sense to target. And we worked that list like crazy. Really, he did most of it. I did my part of calling people to see, but it was his job search. Which leads me to the part that I did wrong, which was I micromanaged. I'm a type A control person, and I drove him crazy. I know.
Guilty.
So, second guessing, offering suggestions when maybe they weren't needed. And if I were to do it all over again, I think I would have said, let's once or twice a week regroup and see where we are with this, versus every single day, because that wasn't supportive. It was counterproductive.
It's so hard to know how to deal and how to support someone best, because especially when you're, used to telling stories and crafting these documents for people, like you're in the career space. I'm sure you want to give as much as you can to your husband in that moment of, support. I probably would have done that too, and I would have been more smothering for sure. We'll ask Chris.
I wasn't in the job search business then, but I was a writer. And so I knew about communication. So I was like, well, maybe say it this way, or maybe,
it's tough. There's no perfect way, but I like how you assess the situation and that you put pencil to paper. One, I think it's easier to remember things when we actually physically write them down. I think that becomes that's become a lost art. And two, I was talking to a client yesterday, and she is working here in Spokane, and I'm not gonna out you, girl. Don't worry. I'm not saying who you are, but she called me to see, hey, is there a best way to go about finding a new role? And I gave her the advice that you just shared right now, which is grab your pen and paper and jot down companies that interest you and write down everyone you know. And she kind of laughed. She's like, everyone I know. And I said, yeah, I dare you to reach over 150 people. She goes, really? I said, well, yeah, there's like a psychology behind this. It's called Dunbar's principle. And we can really, as people, only manage about 150 to 200 relationships in our brain. Like, it's just it's science, which I love all these like behavioral engineering factors and stuff. So it's amazing because I feel like then you probably have your next position within 1 to 2 degrees of your current network.
It was a friend of a friend of a friend. And that is, and not in layoff situations, but in proactive job searches, that's the approach that he has since taken. And a lot of times it's amazing when you really work that network, how well it has benefited him.
This is one of my favorite things that you coach on, which is, and for those of you who don't know, Virginia and I also, we run a room about every month with Kenneth Lang. So if you don't know him yet too, please do connect with Kenneth too.
Yeah.
Hey, Kenneth. And we do lions, tigers, and resumes. Oh my, where if you join us, we will literally answer any question you'd like to toss our way. And then Kenneth is our LinkedIn expert. And so he really has tons of information for job seekers, but anybody who wants to up their game on LinkedIn. So join us. But one of the things you talk about a lot is your networking in threes. So can you talk a little bit through that?
Yep. So every time you are wrapping up speaking with someone, you just close it out by saying, can you think of 3 other people that I should be speaking with? And what that does is, number one, it expands your network, but then number 2, it allows you to loop back with that original person and say, thank you so much, I spoke with them and this is what came up. And so it allows you to keep fostering that relationship.
Oh, that's so smart.
And he has found out about roles before they were posted, immediately as they were posted. It's quite remarkable.
That's incredible. And you know what, too, is there's something really powerful about working with a mentor and then actually circling back, like you mentioned, with that person who offered you help to say, I took your advice and I put it into action and here's how it went. That's a huge credibility and relationship builder. So
and I feel like in sales, you have that natural skill. You're used to having to get past gatekeepers and get key opinion leaders to come to you. And you do it by slowly circling in on those people through your 2nd and 3rd degree connections.
Yeah. Yeah. Like sharks. Yeah.
There you go. Less violently. Yeah.
Just kidding. Not like sharks. But, okay. So can you talk a little bit through a couple of ways that you might recommend someone to go about finding right fit companies? Because in this, like, let's take tech, for example. If someone says, oh, I'm interested in working in tech, it sounds really exciting and innovative. Immediately we think Google, Amazon, all these huge names, but really, I think there are smarter ways to target than the biggest branded companies.
Big names, yeah.
What are some ways that you recommend people go about making the company list?
So first way is to work that list of people and ask them about companies and they've heard, and when several people start naming the same companies that are good or bad, you've got some things that are worth addressing. The LinkedIn is really powerful in terms of filters where you can search by I think you can search by size of company. Things like the local Better Business Bureau journals are great. Even things like best places to work lists. I mean, some of those are HR applying, but when you start to see companies appearing over and over in a couple of different searches, then it is worth taking a second look.
Absolutely.
But you have to be clear on what your deal breakers are. So, don't have 10 deal breakers, but maybe have 2 or 3. And you can whittle things away by having conversations with people, watching YouTube videos where the C-suites are talking about things in presentations, looking at reviews online, talking to people that have left there, I think is a really great thing to listen to too. Again,
Same.
probably a lot of people that leave under not the greatest terms, so you have to keep that in mind. But if you hear the same thing over and over again, then that's probably something that's worth considering.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And it's interesting when I find people are for in this case, if we're talking about medical sales, like say they want to go work for Medtronic. Well, they set those filters to Medtronic in their area. But really, if we look at people who used to work at Medtronic, and have a conversation with them, or maybe 2 jobs ago, it's powerful intel you can get, because people are willing to give a little more information when they're not beholden to the company at that moment. And sometimes a little bit of time away. So if it's 2 jobs away, sometimes a little extra time away with those people we connect with can even soften some of that anxiety if they left under difficult circumstances.
That's right. And a lot of people like from Strikers and Medtronics then go to smaller companies, some more, some startup-ish ones. And if that might be something that you'd want to target, you can do your search for Medtronic, see where they are now, and then you can have conversations with them about how they found out about those companies, how they made their move there, and maybe and find out about other companies that they were considering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's the difference you see with folks who take this kind of approach versus the applying online, writing a ChatGPT resume and blasting it to every application on LinkedIn? What possibilities are really there for people who take this more targeted approach?
To me, it's the fast pass at Disney World. It gets you to the interview much quicker, and therefore it shortens your job search. That's not to say that you should not apply online as a strategy. In fact, you need to, when you are networking, you need to make sure that your resume is in their system. But it will allow you to speak with people that can then get comfort around who you are. And people will usually hire someone that they have a level of confidence and trust about than someone that's a complete stranger. So it's a way to make you less of a stranger, and it really it bumps you to the front of the line.
What are some ways? So I really like what you bring up there, because a lot of times it seems like we feel when we have all the right things on our resume, someone will read them and say, aha, this person checks all my boxes, hire them today. But really, I would argue that there's still so much more that has to be done on a trust front that it can't completely rely on just the resume. So what are some other ways that people, that if someone is looking for a role, what are some other ways they can start to build that trust and relationship in addition to the resume? Like, what are the other puzzle pieces?
Yeah. So writing a LinkedIn profile that when someone reads it, they feel like they've heard your voice, I think is really helpful. You can use recommendations on LinkedIn that will share with others a lot. A lot of times recommendations speak to someone's performance, but they also speak to someone's character. So I feel like that's a way to give someone an insight into who you are. Your LinkedIn About section is a place where, again, you have the same themes as your resume, but you might be able to tell a little bit about yourself and what drives you. I wrote a resume the other day. He wasn't in medical sales. He was in corporate development, but we talked about how he'd grown up as a son of a grocery store owner and how that experience, lent. So that's, again, insight into someone's person that makes you feel like you've gotten to know them better.
That's such a great example. I had a client recently, and I said, one of the questions I like to ask is, what's something that nobody knows about you, right? Or what's something interesting about you that, that only your closest friends know, and, if you care to share it with me, And he said, I grew up in a car. He said, I was so broke, and our family was really poor. And so for a long time, I grew up in a car, and I would do janitorial work at some of the stadiums around my town. And I said, that's incredible. Now, this man now he's a CRO for a global company.
Wow. Talk about ethic and hustle.
Oh, 100%. And salt of the earth person, as you can imagine. And the next thing that he said that shocked me was, and I would never want anybody to know that about me. And I was shocked because to me, I thought, what an incredible story Like what an incredible, and not just because it's a Cinderella story in nature, but like coming from such humble beginnings to now leading companies in the way that this man deals with people. I mean, the testimonials on this guy were, they would make you cry. People were so drawn to him. And, but it, it really wasn't until he and I had talked for him to admit that. And I just thought, man, that's foundational in your story. I wish more people use those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I get where people don't want to, if it brings back pain, they don't want to bring it up, but maybe he could have, he could have said he came from humble beginnings.
Yeah.
But anyway, those are ways that you can allow anyone to have an insight into your soul that, and then again, conversations with people where you're having those one-on-one discussions. It gives someone insight into your character, what you're about, and that reputation will be carried on as people speak about you to decision makers.
I was looking at one of your posts recently because I follow all of your stuff, of course. And you had mentioned that 20 years ago, we read everything on paper. And 10 years ago, we read everything on a screen. And now we read everything. If I had it, I'd hold it up on our cell phone. So
and God help me if we start writing on Apple Watches.
Yeah, I know.
Really in trouble, but yeah, so far we're not.
I'm gonna have to get some like magnifying glasses at that point. So can you talk a little bit about how the resume specifically has made the transition to serve the different ways that we read and absorb information now?
Well, and the reason that I wrote that post is that it's important to understand that we read really differently online than we do in print. Online, our eyes do two things very differently. Number one, we have a hard time digesting dense text. And number two, we tend to jump all over the place. We're super ADD online. In a way, we're not in print. In print, we're taught start at the top corner, go left to right, top to bottom. And we can read big fat things like that pretty easily because we are doing this. On screens, when we see dense text, our eyes glaze over, we fight the urge to print. And what happens is if someone is in a rush and something is hard to read, you run the risk that they're going to skip it. What happens with mobile is that a 5-line paragraph turns into a 9-line paragraph. And then it's so long, your eyes again glaze over and you don't read it. So the good thing is it is very easy to overcome those things by keeping your lines. I think of an 8.5 by 11 page on your computer or whatever that equivalent is. Keep your paragraphs to 2 to 3 lines. Add a little bit of white space in between each and every bullet and paragraph, and keep your margins to about no more than 1/2 inch or all the way around, and that will facilitate a skim read on any device. And anything that is written for a screen read can print out and be read fine. It's just that the reverse isn't true. And those are principles that should apply to emails, slide decks, anything. Just don't tell your high school English teacher about them because it's very different from what we were taught to write in school.
Think about that.
It works.
It does. Yeah. It does. I remember in school, I got my journalism degree from Ohio University. And I remember how we would study these classic writers who didn't follow traditional English grammar rules. And they were like the cowboys of the novel world.
Yeah, Wild West. Yeah.
Yeah. We're like, wow.
Yeah.
And, anymore, if we want somebody to read something online, you're right. If we don't use that kind of smart writing, then we'll lose people. And that we don't want to do. So I really like how you bring that up. There's a method that I was recently taught from a group I'm in for copywriting, and it was the 131 or 3131 method, where essentially it's what you say. It's, you've got your headline and then your space before and after, and then a little bit of meat text, and then a space before and after, and then another headline, and just to keep people tracking, because otherwise, if you lose someone, that's your only chance. So, what are some other ways people can use those kind of visual cues or visual interest on the resumes that you write to keep people interested and keep them reading?
Well, the other thing that I stated it, but then I never followed up, is talking about how our eyes jump around a lot.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can use some design elements to draw the reader where you want them to go. And I'm not talking about crazy design like logos or, graphs and charts. I'll use those from time to time, but what I'm talking about really is things like bolding and shading. So for instance, if I want to show that my client has worked with some of the bigger names in pharma or device, I'm going to bold the company names,
Mm-hmm.
and I might keep the job titles not in bold. If I wanted to show that someone has progressed to a certain level and maybe they've worked with lesser known companies, maybe I will bold or shade the job titles instead of the company names. The other thing I do is recognizing that we will start sentences but not finish them because we're jumping online. I front load it, which means I put the most powerful part of whatever I'm trying to say at the beginning, because I don't know if the reader will get to the end. And that's a really big departure from how we were taught in high school. So if you led a strategy that resulted in 30% territory growth, you need to start off by saying, grew territory 30% by doing XYZ versus throwing that number at the end.
Yep, absolutely. It's like throwing your line in the water with the right bait. Like, go for the bait
That's
first.
right.
Let the line be the rest of the
That's
sentence.
right. That's right. The
Yeah.
other thing, when people are reading bullets, skim readers read the first bullet, then the last one, and stuff in the middle often doesn't get looked at until a little later down the road. And so I really aim to be strategic and put something super powerful at the beginning, secondarily impactful at the bottom. And then if I have more than 5 or 6 bullets, I will break them up into subcategories, because too many bullets, someone goes, ugh, too many, too hard to read, I'm not reading it.
Yes. Yes. Or death by bullets, as I've heard you
Death
say.
by bullets, yeah.
Okay. So we talked, resume, we talked LinkedIn profile. What are some other things that people need to be equipped with to really stand out in today's job market?
You need a resume, you need a LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile needs to be complete. You can't not have a picture. You need to have the key sections completed to help you show up on search. Headline, the about section, picture, job titles, experience, skills, education, if you have that. I would say, again, a list of company targets, a list of people that you want to speak with. You need to know your story. You need to be able to, in 30 to 60 seconds, when someone says, what are you looking for? You need to say, this is what I'm known for, and this is the kind of role I'm targeting.
Can we talk about that a little bit more? Because you know what I find is something that I hear a lot when I work with somebody, especially someone who's been in medical sales or healthcare for like 20, 25 years, maybe 15, 20 years. And they'll say, this is the first time, now that we've written this resume, this is the first time I learned how to talk about myself. Because I think so often we think, okay, we're going after this job. I need to have this laundry list of all the things I've ever accomplished.
Here are all my stats and my contests. Yeah.
Exactly. But really, I mean, we know as people, we connect over story. So that's why you're an executive storyteller, right? So do you find that often just the process of writing someone's resume can help them to, 1, understand their story, and 2, learn how to tell it?
It helps them to identify themes that they maybe haven't considered before. I'm amazed how many times when people have the luxury to tell their whole story, they realize that there are commonalities. Often if they are known for going in and fixing a territory that was a hot mess, or launching a product, or overcoming obstacles like, in pharma black box. There's commonalities that they tend to be brought into over and over again. And when we identify that's how they describe themselves. That's their brand or their reputation. And so that's when someone says, tell me about yourself, that's the kind of stuff you talk about. But without having that conversation where they have reflected back on their career in its entirety, that doesn't become, often apparent because we're too close to our own blood, sweat, and tears. It's a lot easier for a stranger to see it, which is why I didn't write my own resume.
Same. That's why I
Yeah.
got branding help as well. I mean, it truly,
Yeah.
we're too close to our own story to tell it
Mhm.
well.
Mhm. We bury the lead.
Yeah, and we probably know too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's hard to pick out what's relevant and what's not.
right. I think that's something that when we're in that, if we're talking layoffs, when we're in that distressed place, it can be hard to go after something with strategy because we get a little bit like knee jerk. We want to do knee jerk reactions because it's that
Mhm.
place of desperation. I've been there plenty of times, so I know it well. And I think that reverse engineering is an undervalued way to go about writing a resume. And it sounds like that's something that you do with all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What I like about the healthcare sales space is there a lot of times they have more staff than other people, not always, but they can say, here's my rank, here's my quota, here's the contest that I won, whatever. And so you can have a little, like a call out box that explains all that, but then the bullets are focused on the story.
Yeah.
This is how bad the territory was, and this is what it's like now.
Mm-hmm.
The before and after story is what you're sharing in those bullets.
Oh yeah. And you know what, that's so for folks who are listening, like Virginia is absolutely dead on here because you do get your quarterly numbers. You do get your rankings. You do get your territory volumes. And if you're in pharma, they might come 6 months to a year late, but you're going to get them.
Yeah.
And, but the thing is, if you have a bad quarter, you have a bad quarter. There are more things to measure. So
Yeah.
I really like how you emphasize the story there and the overall impact. So we're not locked
That's right.
into, I was sixth this quarter instead of third. Well, there's a lot more you were doing just besides being ranked.
And the context can matter. I just did a sales resume last week, and the person was thrown into territory with dead in the water accounts, like companies that were bankrupt. And he only made inroads in at 12 of 44 accounts. And so we said, made inroads in 12 of 44 accounts that were dead in the water. And boom, you're a miracle worker.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I feel like you help people give themselves more credit, truly, because at the end of the day, which we all love to say in sales, I can't believe I just said it on here, but, we're more than just that rank. And I think that being able to tell your story well is really powerful. So if you guys are not yet following Virginia, do not wait. Make it the next thing you do. And Virginia, if people want to connect with you, follow you, see what else you're doing online, where can they find you?
My company name is virginiafrancoresumes.com. You can follow me on all my socials are pretty much my name and with the word resumes at the end. And I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all the usual stuff.
Oh my gosh, you're on Instagram too? Okay, I gotta follow you over there too.
Barely, but yeah, I'm on everything. Yeah.
Don't look up on my Instagram. It's no good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned so much from you in my own business and my own career. And I know that you're a really powerful storyteller, and I love what you're doing in the space with helping these executives tell their stories better. So thanks for all of that. And thanks for joining us today. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you. Great questions.
All right. Till next time. We'll see you later.